Sri Lanka's most powerful news brand.
Hello and welcome to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. Trust in the mainstream media is at an all-time low, but no one should be surprised, and the media has itself to blame. This sad state of affairs is a self-inflicted wound and actually a conscious business model. The media no longer has an interest in reporting news. Media today propagates ideology. Cross-talking the state of the media, I'm joined by my guest, Eric Alterman in New York. He is a SUNY Distinguished Professor of English and Journalism at Brooklyn College, as well as the liberal media columnist for The Nation. Also in New York, we have Lionel. He is a legal analyst and a news decoder at lionelmedia.com. And in Plymouth, we cross to Patrick Henningsen. He is a journalist, writer, and founder of the news website 21stcenturywire.com. All right, gentlemen, crosstalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want, and I always appreciate it. Let me go to Lionel first in New York. I'm not going to list all of the mistakes the mainstream media has made over the last few months, because that would take up the entire program and then some. Suffice to say, Lionel, I think it's quite evident that the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC, and other news organizations, they're making mistakes because they have a blind hatred for Donald Trump. Their blind hatred is throwing journalistic practices and principles out the window, and this is damaging the information sphere in the United States, and I would say the political process as well. Go ahead, Lionel.
I would venture to say it's an admixture of Trump derangement syndrome in full bloom. It's negligence, it's malfeasance, and also, isn't it amazing and shocking, perhaps, that none of these mistakes ever inure to the benefit of Trump or anybody else, or they never deal with Hillary Clinton or those of the so-called left and progressive left or whatever. It's always a unidirectional mistake. There's never, and by the by, the biggest problem right now that is facing this country is not this promulgation and this proliferation, I should say, of sexual dalliances. It's the fact that today's mainstream media, today's Ted Baxter, sock puppet, echo chamber, rancid, odious, ossified media is dead. It's through. It's in the death throes, and it faces an existential threat. That's their problem. And you'd think they'd be shaping up instead of becoming more and more negligent. That's what's amazing.
Eric, let me go to you. That's a very good point to mention. I mean, they should get their act together. But, you know, we still don't know why 3 different outlets confirmed the same bogus Russia story last week. They just had a retraction or an update, but they didn't explain to the public how they came to that disastrous conclusion across the board. I mean, no wonder people don't trust the media anymore. They're not transparent. Go ahead, Eric.
I find everything I've heard said on this program so far to be ridiculous. I think the mainstream media are, first of all, the word media is a plural noun, so to talk about the media, you have to make distinctions between which media you're discussing. I think the media you mean, which is CNN, the New York Times, Washington Post, etc., I think they're in an impossible position because they are faced with a president who lies on average 6 times a day. That's a statistic compiled by the Washington Post. He probably lies much more than that, but those are the lies they've caught using a very narrow definition of lies.
So the mainstream media doesn't lie? The mainstream media doesn't lie? Is that what you're saying?
First of all, we're talking... Well, I'm pretty capable of saying exactly what I want, so you don't have to put words in my mouth.
Well, I'm trying to understand your words, that's all.
News lies. Fox News lies. But no, the mainstream media, by and large, certainly the New York Times, Washington Post, and other reputable outlets, never lie on purpose. They make mistakes. But it's very hard to cover a president who is purposely undermining American democracy, who, again, lies on average 6 times a day and doesn't care that he's caught lying. Let me ask you a question. Just take one, for instance. Donald Trump repeatedly tweeted that Barack Obama wiretapped him on purpose. Now, the Justice Department found that that was not true. Has Donald Trump
but there seems to be overwhelming evidence that he was surveilled. He was surveilled.
I'm not done. I'm not done.
Let me
I'm
go
not done.
Okay.
No, there's no evidence for that.
No, I said before this program started that I don't want to have any filibustering because I believe in freedom of speech, and I would like to hear the freedom of speech from Patrick in Plymouth. Go ahead, Patrick. React to what you've heard so far.
Yeah. First of all, I'm gonna disagree with what Eric said about defining the terms. I'm going to say media as a singular entity, because when it comes to all things Russian or all things Trump, the media. Well, it might be grammatically incorrect, but it does represent the reality of the situation, which is that media is completely together in lockstep, reading off the same hymn sheet on all things Russian. And if you want to talk about the mainstream media, these are all fake news stories from mainstream media. This is just my file for the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN. Granted, CNN's half of this, but this is perhaps my favorite. Pokemon Go was hijacked by Vladimir Putin to mislead Americans. This is a CNN exclusive. This is just one example of many. And to say that what you're doing, Eric, is creating a false equivalency, trying to compare Donald Trump's Twitter tirades to what's supposed to be the Fourth Estate, who has a collective budget, operating budget, of over $10 billion in the United States. All of these mainstream media outlets basically putting out fake news. The CNN WikiLeaks story is quite interesting because the same so-called sources were used apparently by CBS News as well as CNN and others. And you read the email and you could see the date. It was September 14th. So I had the question is, did these sources actually read the so-called evidence, or should it have been done in Braille? Or the CNN's journalists, so-called journalists, are they illiterate? How does this type of mistake come to be, and how is it repeated and passed on to laundered through CNN and then on to CBS? And they use Twitter. CNN uses Twitter to put fake news out and then retracts it.
Let me go to Lionel here. I mean, the story that was just mentioned by Patrick there. I mean, they want to believe in what they say. They see this and they jump on board. Is it laziness, or is it, what level of intentionality? Because like I said, there's so many of them. I mean, Patrick just held up a whole stack of them. I mean, it seems endless. I can't imagine this would have happened during the Obama administration. Go ahead, Lionel.
Well, at first you have to start off with the idea, as evidence, Exhibit A, by, well, after all, you have the most lying president, so therefore anything that happens is somehow outweighed and canceled by the fact that, well, Trump is a liar. Let's take this week. Now, all you had was a CNN story about Donald Trump Jr. and a WikiLeaks memo or email, and all it did was reading a date correctly. It's all it involved was just reading a date correctly and not say, oh, 4/14. That's all it was. It was a transposition of numbers. That's all it was. Now, you tell me how Donald Trump's mendacity, and thank you for clarifying that medium is a singular noun and not a plural, but tell me how tell me how his mendacity, his ability to wax veritas, could you explain to me how that has anything to do with CNN or somebody else just saying, you know what, we made a mistake? That's all it is.
Eric, do you want to reply to that? Go ahead.
Sure. First of all, I'm not here to defend CNN. I think CNN is pretty crappy. And they did make a mistake, and they did admit it. So journalists make mistakes all the time. It's a very imperfect practice. That's why it's called the first draft of history. The press is going to make lots of mistakes. David Frum said that. What you were doing is actually trying to create a false equivalence between the deliberate lies of the Trump administration and its supporters and the mistakes that are part of being a journalist. I'm not saying they don't make mistakes. I'm not saying this wasn't a serious mistake.
No,
CNN has admitted it's a mistake.
No, I'm not. I'm attacking your specious premise.
Has Donald Trump?
No, it's not.
When has Donald Trump? I'm not done, sir. I'm not. No. Can I finish? When has Donald Trump admitted that Barack Obama was born in the United States? Waiting.
Okay, let's talk about something else.
What date did that happen?
This is very good, Altman. Very good.
Something else. Sure.
Don't talk about what we're talking about now. Bring something else up. Fantastic. Look, I was giving you an example. I was attacking your absolutely baseless claim. You said the problem is, forget the fact that this is fake media. We have the most lying and the most mendacious president there is. That's what you said. I was addressing that. So what do? When you're losing the argument? Let's bring up the birther thing. Let's change the subject. Look, I don't know with whom you debate on a regular basis.
Listen, fella, that's not what I said. What I said is, what I said is,
listen, fella.
Okay, what I said, you're misrepresenting what I said.
Why?
You're misrepresenting what I said. What I said is that it's very difficult to cover administration.
Let Eric speak. Go ahead, Eric, go ahead. Go ahead.
What I said, I did not change the subject. What I said is the media are not up to the job of covering a president who lies on average 6 times a day and doesn't care that he's caught lying. Will just lie every time he's caught lying. So they're not. That's very difficult to do because you can't fact check every single sentence the president says. So they're going to make mistakes. There's going to be more mistakes. They're going to be serious mistakes. That does not take away from the fact that this president is purposely undermining our democracy, and our media are the only thing that stands between.
Yeah, well, let me go to Patrick here. It seems to me this really low standards of journalism, that's what's destroying democracy and the faith in the system. The journalism has to take responsibility for what they do. 40 seconds, Patrick, before we go to the break. Go ahead.
Newsflash, Eric and everybody, politicians lie. Barack Obama, I'm going to close Gitmo as soon as I'm president, and I could get on and on and on those lies. So politicians lie. That's expected.
That was not a lie. That was not a lie.
Let me finish. Okay. Let me finish, sir. Let me finish, sir. Okay? You can't expect to make excuses for what you call the Fourth Estate, and so it's okay for them to, what you call, make mistakes. They're fabricating news stories. They're fabricating sources. They are literally making up news and putting it out on the cycle. There is no evidence of Russian collusion. 18 months later, there's nothing. Fake news for 18 straight months on all the major networks and newspapers. That is the fake news crisis. It is not Donald Trump's
gentlemen, I'm going to jump in here. We're going to go to a short break, and after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on the state of the media. Stay with our team. Okay, let me go back to Eric in New York. Eric, I think you at least concede that the liberal mainstream media has it out for Trump, and I think that's why they're making all of these mistakes, because they have a certain goal, and anything that they can get their hands on or even make up, they're going to employ, because they think they're morally correct. They think they're doing the right thing. I actually believe that they think that they're doing the right thing. But what bothers me is what we said in this program, is it damages the profession of journalism in the process and the trust people have in the media. Go ahead, Eric.
Well, first of all, I concede nothing you just said. To go back to the previous point, I happen to have written my doctoral dissertation at Stanford University on presidential lying, on the history of presidential lying. I published a book called When Presidents Lie, and I'm writing a second book on presidential lying right now for Basic Books. Not all presidents lie. It's true most presidents lie.
Didn't lie.
Most modern
Obama never told a lie.
May I finish? May I finish? May I finish?
Obama won't be in your new book. I guarantee that.
Eric, keep going, Eric. Keep going.
Well, the example you brought up, sir, is not a lie. Obama said he would close Gitmo. He tried to close Gitmo, and Congress wouldn't let him. That's not a lie.
We're still waiting.
That's a failed policy.
We're still waiting 9 years later.
May I finish? You're waiting for Obama to close Gitmo.
I want to know when it's going to close.
President Hillary Clinton. May I finish?
Yeah.
May I finish?
Sure.
Now, to answer the moderator's question, the quote-unquote liberal media are not liberal. The mainstream media is in the business of making money. That's why during the campaign, Donald Trump was given billions of dollars in free media, with his speeches being carried live, his phone calls being carried live, where he lied consistently, lied about virtually everything he said. As again, he has told, according to the Washington Post count, I believe.
Yeah, but Eric, this program is about.
You're not letting me finish.
Well, no, because you're going into the weeds again. This program is about professional journalism. We don't need to hear the crickets on these other topics. Okay, I mean, birthers and all this is fine. But it's about the professionalism of journalism, and they are breaking their bond with the public. The polls show it, okay? Let me go to Lionel. Last year, CBS News said, the president said, Trump is good for CBS for exactly the same reasons that Eric mentioned here. It's not about getting the story right. It's about the kind of propaganda that you want to propagate and make money off of it. That is a disgrace to journalism. You should stop calling it journalism then. Lionel, go ahead.
This is going to be one of the greatest interviews, discussions ever. Because this fella does exactly what everybody hates. He is the personification of that which we hate, prevarication and not admitting, which is true and obvious to anybody. The issue that Peter asked was, what do you do about, not fake news, not bias, because we can argue bias all day long, but what about when they just get it wrong? Then they just get it wrong. That's the framework, Mr. PhD. That's the framework. So what this fella does is, instead of answering that because he can answer it, he's smart enough to realize, I have no answer. Let me throw in something about Trump being a liar. And that is the reason why the mainstream liberal media is dying. It's in its last throes. And everybody knows it. And you, sir, are Exhibit A. And I present to the jury, that is the world, see, this is what it's about. You can't even answer the question. All you had to do was just concede that the duty of journalism is just to get it right. Would it have killed you, fella, to say that? But you can't do it. Because you know we got you this one. And I guess, maybe this is some kind of a...
CNN made a mistake and they admitted it.
Patrick, let me go to Patrick here. But Patrick, one of the things, let's deal with facts here, unlike the liberal media that make things up, all right? I mean, you know, it was 17 intelligence agencies. It's assumed as a fact that the DNC was hacked, but the FBI never looked at the servers. The DNC didn't allow that. What I'm getting at is that you keep hearing on CNN, MSNBC, et cetera, they keep repeating the same unsubstantiated claims as if it is a law of gravity. And you never hear anybody pushing back there. This groupthink, this is exactly what it is. It's groupthink. And it's turned into a cult. It's a religious cult now they have. And anyone that violates it is considered a heretic. Go ahead, Patrick, like us, I suppose.
Yeah, first I will agree with Eric that it's not a liberal media exclusively per se. There happens to be a kind of a liberal hysterical insurgency right now in the mainstream media, but CNN will read straight off of Pentagon briefings or State Department briefings, and the New York Times will do the same straight off the party line on certain issues. So they really are there to protect the establishment, whether that's a liberal or a conservative establishment or a military-industrial complex establishment. You just have this hysteria going on. The problem with all journalistic standards have been thrown out the window in the last 18 months because when it comes to anything Russia or Trump, but especially Russia, this is much bigger than Trump, by the way. This has a geopolitical scope to it. It's tell, don't show. So the accusations get rolled out, but they don't actually have any evidence. Can someone find me one piece of evidence that Russia hacked the U.S. elections or even hacked the DNC or colluded or meddled or anything? Nothing. The Facebook bot story that everybody ran with from the Washington Post to the New York Times, that was, if you really drill down on that story, that was a case of the Obama administration colluding with a Silicon Valley company, Facebook. Senator Warner from Virginia did multiple trips over there to try to extract some story about Russian bots. Finally, Facebook capitulated and gave him a narrative about all these Russian bots purchasing Facebook ads. It's a laugh, and that dominated the United States mainstream, all networks, news cycles for I don't know how long, weeks, okay? That is a fake story. That is a fabricated narrative. It's designed for a specific political purpose. The problem with political journalists and biased partisan journalists, and Eric, I think you, unfortunately, you do fall into that category, is that you're good for the party, but you're really not good for America, because you're picking one side and you're letting the people who are singing your song off the hook every single time. That is the problem.
Okay, let me go to Eric. You know, Eric, we had David from The Atlantic. There's the same man that brought us WMDs in Iraq, coined the phrase axis of evil. Okay, yeah. And he in The Atlantic was on CNN, and he said about this story that the networks got wrong on this emails, WikiLeaks to the Trump campaign. He said, mistakes are precisely the reason that people should trust the media. Okay, try to swallow that. It's the process of bringing truth to light. I mean, this has got to be the most Orwellian thing I think I've ever heard in media. Okay, because we're wrong, people should trust us. What the hell is he talking about?
Well, I'm not here as David Frum's representative, but I imagine that you're probably taking that out of context. As
No, not at all. I took it exactly from, I wrote it out.
I don't get it.
See, then, okay, you just dismiss it. You dismiss it. You go out of context.
I don't get it.
Okay, really?
No, yeah, it probably is. But may I address your point? CNN, which I'm not here to defend, I think they do a crappy job, but CNN apologized for its mistake.
It didn't explain to its viewers why it made that mistake. It did not explain. No transparency. They demanded from everybody else. They demanded from Donald Trump, but they give their viewers no transparency after what they've been doing for 18 months. Okay, never any transparency.
I'm not here to defend CNN.
I'm not here. I'm not asking you to be their lawyer.
I don't care what they do.
I do. I care what the media does. I think as journalists we have a responsibility. You have a degree in it, right, of journalism. I think you know what kind of responsibilities go along with the profession.
No,
Lionel, go ahead, jump in. Go ahead.
I don't have a degree in journalism. You know, so that's another mistake.
It would have been better.
Maybe you want to apologize for that.
I apologize. Okay, I made a mistake. See, a real journalist can do it. A real journalist can do it. Okay, I don't have to carry water for CNN or anybody else.
I'd like to meet one here.
Go ahead, Lionel.
Bad, Peter. Bad. Bad. Now, what could have been done was originally, what this fella could have done, this fella could have said, look, we live in a different world right now. It's a 24/7 machine. It's this runaway train. It's this monster that you got to feed constantly. The days of Cronkite, the days of being able to sit around in your office and luxuriate until 6 o'clock and double and triple check, that's a part of the problem. Maybe there's a zealousness. Maybe there's a part of bias. He could have answered that. That's a real problem because it's the immediacy. It's the days of social media. It's the fact that citizen and civilian journalists and alternative media and foreign media are chomping at the bit, all right, and chomping at the heels of these people. I understand that. Now, but that could have been done. But instead, and this is the point, and I hope, Peter, that somehow everybody remembers this and just takes this fella's comment and just says, this is the problem. It's always Trump. Even when you could have very easily said, okay, look, I'll make a concession. Look, the problem is that, no, even then, we don't give an inch. The same thing with Russia. Even though right now we've been talking about this story and not one person in any medium or the media collectively has ever been able to say, here is the best evidence of any kind of collusion or changing the votes or whatever, even though that's never been done. They don't miss a beat, and they don't give in, and you just keep forward. That's the problem. And when in doubt, when your back is against the wall, when you have absolutely nothing to say,
okay, let me jump in here. Let me give Patrick the last word. Let me give Patrick the last word. I think one of the interesting things in this information war that's going on is that how the mainstream media allows itself to be played by Trump every single day. He's calling the shots. They loathe him, but he's actually determining the news cycle, and they cannot accept that. Okay, and I think that's one thing that they need to get their head around. Go ahead. Last few seconds, Patrick. Go ahead.
Sure. Whether it's the fake dossier put out by BuzzFeed and echoed by CNN and all these other sort of fake stories about Trump, and Donald Trump has a right to go to Twitter at that point and defend himself, and anyone else would probably do the same if they're in his position, whether he's a pathological liar or not.
Okay, I'm Patrick on that. I'm very spirited discussion, gentlemen, but we've run out of time. Many thanks to my guests in New York and in Plymouth, and thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time, and remember, crosstalk rules.